Hey. How are you today? You won't believe what you're about to hear. A story of adultery and high drama. Keep calm and get into the story. I once thought the proudest moment of my life would be watching my daughter, Lily, open her acceptance letter to Harvard. Seeing that bold congratulations staring back at us. Welcoming her to one of the most renowned universities in the world felt like the culmination of everything I had ever strived for. Every late night, every sacrificed weekend, every vacation deferred, and even my health, all of it seemed justified in that moment. When Lily hugged me, tears of joy in her eyes, and thanked me for always believing in her, I told myself it had all been worth it. I was her father, her supporter, her hero, but pride can be a double-edged sword, and mine was about to cut deep. The day I drained my 401k to cover Lily's tuition, I thought I was doing what any good father would do. Her smile, the way she showed me off to her friends as the dad who would do anything for his family, it made me feel invincible. But I was blissfully unaware that in signing those checks, I was also signing away my peace of mind. The storm didn't hit all at once. It began like a faint shadow creeping into the corners of my world, subtle enough to ignore at first. By Thanksgiving, though, that shadow had grown. Thanksgiving was supposed to be a celebration, a chance to savor Lily's success with the family. My brother Jack, always the charming host, had set the stage perfectly. His house glowing with warmth, the dining table overflowing with food, and laughter filling every corner. Jack had always been the golden boy of the family, the one who effortlessly commanded attention. Yet that day his smile felt off. Lily was glowing as she shared stories from her first semester. How her professor had called her paper on molecular genetics brilliant. She gestured animatedly, her laughter filling the room like music. Everyone was captivated, especially Jack. "You've got a real gift for storytelling, kiddo," he said, leaning back in his chair with that familiar, easy confidence. "You're going to change the world." It should have been a simple compliment, but something about the way his gaze lingered on her felt wrong. Then Greg, my cousin, chimed in. Slurring his words after a few too many drinks, he said, "You know, Lily, you're the spitting image of Jack. Same eyes, same smile. It's uncanny." The words hit me like a hammer. The room around me seemed to still, the noise fading to a muffled hum. Jack's smile faltered, just for a moment, but it was enough. Lisa, my wife, laughed, but it was forced and too loud. "Oh, stop it, Greg," she said, brushing it off with a wave of her hand. "You've had too much to drink." Her voice, though, betrayed her. I glanced at her and saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear? Guilt? I couldn't tell, but it was there. My stomach churned. Jack cleared his throat and stood abruptly. "I'll grab more wine," he said, disappearing into the kitchen. Greg, oblivious to the grenade he had just lobbed, chuckled. "What? I'm just saying, family genes are strong, right?" Lisa shot me a look, her smile tight and strained as she whispered urgently, "Ignore him. He doesn't know what he's talking about." But I wasn't looking at her. I was looking at Lily, her bright eyes, her unmistakable smile, and then at Jack's empty chair. The pieces began to fall into place. The long hours Jack had spent at our house over the years, always offering to help when I wasn't around. The way Lisa's laughter seemed a little too genuine when he was near. The nagging doubts I'd never dared to examine. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, while Lisa slept beside me. My chest felt heavy, my mind spinning with unspoken fears. Greg's drunken observation replayed in my head like a broken record. Lily's smile is just like Jack's. For the first time, I didn't just feel uneasy, I felt afraid. Afraid of the truth that might unravel everything I thought I knew. And in the silence of that night, the cracks in my perfect world began to show. I forced out a laugh, trying to shove the intrusive thought back into the dark corner of my mind where it belonged. But then I looked at Lisa, and my stomach sank. She was smiling, but not the kind of smile that reached her eyes. It was taut, forced, the kind she wore when she was caught off guard. Her gaze flicked to Greg, then to me, and finally settled on her wine glass as if it held the answers to the universe. "Greg," she said, her voice a little too light, a little too composed. "I think you've had enough to drink tonight, don't you?" Greg, oblivious, chuckled and raised his glass with a sloppy grin. "Oh, come on. I'm just saying family resemblance and all that. Nothing wrong with it, but there was something wrong. I felt it deep in my gut, a gnawing unease I couldn't ignore." Jack reappeared from the kitchen just then, a freshly opened bottle of wine in hand. His movements were practiced a little too casual, and his smile stretched just a bit too wide. "What did I miss?" he asked, setting the bottle down and pouring himself a glass. Lisa jumped in before anyone else could answer. "Nothing," she said quickly, her tone clipped. "Just Greg being Greg." Jack's eyes flicked to mine, his expression unreadable before he raised his glass. "Well, here's to family," he said smoothly. The table erupted in clinks of glasses, but I barely noticed. My mind was already elsewhere, spinning, analyzing, revisiting years of memories with new, unsettling clarity. How many times had Jack been at my house when I wasn't? How many moments had I overlooked because I trusted him? Trusted her? The rest of the dinner was a haze. I nodded when appropriate, smiled when expected, but I was miles away, trapped in a vortex of suspicion. Every glance Jack and Lisa exchanged, every time her laugh sounded just a little too bright, felt like another piece of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. By the time we got home, I was unraveling. Lisa headed straight to bed, but I stayed downstairs, staring out into the darkened yard. Greg's careless words echoed relentlessly in my head. "Lily's smile is just like Jack's." I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. But the thought had taken root, and no amount of reasoning could uproot it. What if it was true? What if my entire life, my sacrifices, my family were built on a lie? The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee, staring at the rising steam like it might hold some kind of answer. Lisa flitted around the kitchen, humming softly, her demeanor breezy, as though nothing had changed. But everything had. "Did you notice how quiet Jack was last night?" I asked, keeping my tone casual while watching her closely. She froze briefly, her hand hovering over the toaster, then shrugged without turning to me. "He's always quiet when Greg drinks too much. You know how he gets?" Her response was too quick, too rehearsed. In Greg's comment, I pressed, feigning nonchalance. "About Lily looking like Jack. That didn't bother you?" This time, Lisa turned to face me, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Are you seriously bringing that up?" "Greg was drunk, Adam. He didn't mean anything by it." Her tone was sharp, defensive, and I could see her grip tighten on the edge of the counter. "It just seemed off," I said carefully. Jack looked uncomfortable. She let out a dramatic sigh, rolling her eyes. "You're overthinking things again, Adam. Honestly, it's exhausting how you latch onto nothing and twist it into something." Her words were like a slap, but it wasn't just the words. It was how she said them. Dismissive, almost cruel. This wasn't the Lisa I thought I knew. Or maybe it was, and I was only now seeing her clearly. Over the following days, her behavior became a glaring red flag. Every time Jack's name came up, even in passing, her responses were more defensive, more barbed. One evening, when I mentioned Jack's upcoming business trip, she snapped. "Why are you so obsessed with him all of a sudden?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "It's like you're looking for something that isn't there." I didn't reply right away. Instead, I watched her, noting the subtle tremor in her hands as she chopped vegetables. She avoided meeting my eyes. "Am I?" I finally said, keeping my tone even. She slammed the knife down on the cutting board, the sound echoing in the tense air. "Yes, Adam, you are, and it's getting old. Maybe focus on something useful for once." Her words stung, but it wasn't just the venom in them. It was the panic beneath them. Lisa had never spoken to me like this before, but instead of deterring me, her aggression only confirmed what I'd begun to fear. I wasn't imagining things. Something was terribly wrong. There was something to uncover. I could feel it in my bones. If Lisa was determined to keep shutting me out, I'd have to find the answers myself. But I needed to tread carefully. She was too on edge, her reactions too sharp, too rehearsed. I had to play this smart. I began noticing the small things, subtle shifts in her behavior that wouldn't have registered before. Her phone, which now never left her side. The hush phone calls that came with vague, dismissive explanations. The late-night walks around the block. She suddenly needed to clear her head. Each detail felt like another fracture in the foundation of our life. But cracks weren't enough. I needed solid proof. One night, while she was in the shower, I searched her drawers in the closet. My hands moved quickly, my heart pounding, though I wasn't even sure what I hoped to find. Receipts? Notes? Anything that could confirm or deny my suspicions. But the drawers were empty of secrets. Lisa was cautious, far too cautious. I turned my focus to Jack, his social media, his work schedule, even how he interacted with the family at large. The Jack I observed now was not the same confident, carefree brother I had always known. He seemed distracted, nervous, like he was carrying a burden he couldn't put down. Piece by piece, things began to align. Lisa's defensiveness, Jack's unease, Greg's careless comment. It all felt connected. These weren't isolated incidents. They were fragments of a larger truth. A truth I was determined to unravel. But I couldn't confront them. Not yet. I needed something undeniable. Until then, I'd keep pretending everything was fine, wearing the mask of a husband and brother while working silently to uncover the betrayal beneath it all. The idea came to me late one night as I lay staring at the ceiling, sleepless as usual. If Lisa wouldn't give me answers and Jack wouldn't come clean, I'd have to find the truth myself. It wouldn't hide from me. Not anymore. The next morning, while Lily was still asleep, I slipped into her bathroom. Her hairbrush sat on the counter, its bristles tangled with strands of blonde hair. My hands trembled as I picked it up, pulling a few strands free. My daughter. My Lily. I reminded myself this wasn't about doubting her. It was about knowing the truth of who I was to her. I placed the hair in a plastic bag, sealing it carefully before stashing it in my desk drawer. A week later, I sat in a clinic, filling out paperwork for a paternity test. The nurse didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer explanations. But one test wasn't enough. I needed a sample from Jack to confirm my fears. I waited patiently, biding my time until the right opportunity presented itself. 2 weekends later, Lisa suggested hosting a family dinner. Jack was, of course, the first to RSVP. As we sat around the table, I played the role of the gracious host, pouring wine and cracking jokes, masking my growing tension with a forced smile. Jack was his usual self, charismatic, quick-witted, and seemingly at ease. But I could see the cracks in his facade. His laugh was too practiced, his movements too stiff. He avoided my eyes, as though he knew I was watching. After dinner, Jack lingered in the living room with a cup of coffee, chatting with Lisa while Lily scrolled through her phone. That was my moment. "Jack," I said, keeping my tone light, "you've got to try this new espresso blend I picked up. It's incredible." He raised an eyebrow, smirking. "What? You think your coffee's better than mine now? Try it and see," I said, handing him a cup. Jack took a sip and nodded. "Not bad. I might just have to steal some next time I'm over." He set the cup down and got up to stretch. That was my chance. While the others were distracted, I grabbed the cup, careful not to smudge the rim, and slipped it into a plastic bag hidden in my pocket. 2 weeks later, the results arrived. Sitting alone in my office, I opened the envelope with shaking hands. My breath came in shallow bursts, a mix of dread and anticipation. Part of me still hoped I was wrong, that this was all in my head. But the truth was there, stark and unrelenting. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, stealing the air from my lungs. Each digit burned into my mind, a cold and unforgiving verdict. Jack wasn't just my brother. He was Lily's father. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. I let the paper fall from my trembling hands onto the desk, the room spinning as the weight of the truth pressed down on me. My legs gave out, and I sank into the chair, gripping the desk's edge to keep from collapsing completely. Every foundation I'd built my life on, every sacrifice, every moment of pride, every ounce of love I had poured into my family, was suddenly rendered hollow. Lisa's betrayal, Jack's betrayal, the sheer magnitude of it was suffocating, threatening to crush me under its weight. But beneath the despair, something else stirred. A fire. They had stolen everything from me. My trust, my pride, my family. Yet I wasn't broken. Not completely. And now I had the truth. The next move was mine. I sat in the dim light of my study for hours, staring at the DNA results that had shattered my world. The paper felt unnaturally heavy, as though it carried the collective weight of every deception, every moment of blindness, every misplaced ounce of trust. I couldn't destroy it, though I wanted to. I couldn't crumple it or shred it or burn it. This piece of paper wasn't just evidence of their betrayal. It was proof of how deeply I had been deceived. The memories flooded in like a relentless tide, each one sharpened by this new reality. Every sleepless night spent working overtime, every dollar I'd poured into Lily's future, every time I'd proudly called her my little girl, had all of it been a lie? Had Jack and Lisa secretly mocked my ignorance, laughing behind my back as I unknowingly played the fool? The rage came first, hot and searing. I slammed my fist onto the desk, the pain barely registering. Jack, my own brother, how could he do this to me? How could he take the one thing I cherished most and twist it into something so cruel? And Lisa, my wife, my partner, the woman I had trusted with my life. She had vowed loyalty, love, and devotion, only to dismantle the very foundation of our family with her lies. Her laughter, her reassurances, her tenderness, they were poisoned now, tainted by deceit. Then came the humiliation. My stomach churned at the thought of everyone who might have known. Greg's drunken remark. Was it more than just casual observation? Did our friends and family see me as a gullible fool, a man too blind to notice the truth right in front of him? The shame was unbearable, but it didn't consume me. Beneath it, another emotion began to surface. It wasn't despair, though I felt hollow. It wasn't even hatred, though the thought of Jack and Lisa together made my blood boil. It was determination. I wouldn't let them destroy me. I wouldn't let their betrayal define me. The rage within me cooled, hardening into something sharper, something colder. I wouldn't confront them with raw emotion. No screaming, no accusations. They'd twist it, turn it against me, and paint me as irrational. No, I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. If they had built their lies on manipulation, I would dismantle those lies with precision. I'd take my time, unraveling their lies piece by piece. Every crack they'd hidden, every weak spot they thought was safe, I would find them. They had underestimated me. My pain would become their undoing. I drew a deep breath, folding the DNA results and locking them away in a drawer. This wasn't over, not even close. They thought their secrets would stay buried, but they were about to discover how wrong they were. My betrayal would be their reckoning. My revenge would be calculated, deliberate, and devastating. I knew where to start. Jack. Jack had always been the golden boy, the one everyone admired. The charming brother with the easy laugh and the magnetic personality. But I'd seen the cracks. They'd always been there, though I hadn't thought much of them before. The way he conveniently forgot to pay his share during family outings. The offhand remarks about tough times, even as he flaunted a brand new car. It didn't take long to uncover the truth. A few discreet inquiries, a few hours digging through public records, and the picture became clear. Jack was drowning in debt. I kept digging, determined to uncover every secret Jack had worked so hard to bury. It didn't take long to find out that he'd been quietly dipping into the family trust, siphoning funds meant for all of us. He'd spun a web of manipulation, playing on our relatives' emotions, guilt-tripping them into covering his debts under the pretense of temporary financial trouble. The deeper I went, the angrier I became. Jack wasn't just a liar. He was a parasite, draining the people who had put their faith in him. And now, with the DNA test results locked away in my desk drawer, the full extent of his betrayal was undeniable. But financial ruin alone wasn't enough. It lacked the personal sting I wanted him to feel. Jack needed to watch the world he'd so carefully constructed collapse around him. He needed to see his golden reputation tarnished, his pride crushed. So I began crafting a plan, methodical and deliberate. Jack's vulnerabilities were easy to pinpoint: his ego, his need to be admired, his addiction to control. Those were the cracks I'd exploit. First, I armed myself with evidence. Bank statements, records of his debts, documentation of his misuse of family funds. I even gathered screenshots of his shady dealings. All of it meticulously organized, ready for deployment. Then, I started laying the groundwork. At the next family gathering, I casually steered the conversation toward the economy. "It's been rough lately," I said, swirling my drink. "Even people who seem successful are feeling the pinch." Jack stiffened, his jaw clenching slightly as he forced a laugh. "Not everyone, Adam," he said, brushing off the comment with a joke about my penchant for overthinking. But his reaction confirmed what I already knew. The cracks were there. Next, I reached out anonymously to his creditors, dropping enough hints to raise red flags. Payments that didn't add up, discrepancies that couldn't be ignored. I didn't need to push hard, just enough to start the chain reaction. From there, I turned my attention to his reputation. Jack had always been the family's golden child, the one everyone trusted implicitly. I didn't attack it outright. Instead, I planted seeds of doubt. Quiet comments to relatives, subtle observations about mismanaged funds and unexpected debts. Nothing direct, just enough to make them wonder. The results came faster than I expected. At family dinners, I overheard whispers about Jack's financial troubles. People started avoiding his calls. His once effortless charm gave way to a strained, tense demeanor. The man who had always seemed untouchable was beginning to unravel. But I wasn't finished. Lisa had grown quieter in recent weeks. She wasn't oblivious. She could sense the undercurrent, though she couldn't quite place its source. Good. Let her wonder. Let her worry. Jack and Lisa had underestimated me. They thought they could keep their lies buried, but I wasn't just exposing their betrayal. I was dismantling it thread by thread. The next family gathering was my stage, and I had rehearsed every move. Jack walked in with his usual grin, but it didn't reach his eyes. His handshake felt weaker, his confidence dimmed. I watched him carefully, noting every nervous glance, every forced laugh. He knew something was wrong, even if he didn't know what. We all settled into the living room, drinks in hand. I started slow, easing into the conversation like nothing was out of the ordinary. "So, Jack," I said, leaning back in my chair, "how's work going these days? Things still busy?" He hesitated, a barely noticeable pause, before flashing his usual smile. "Oh, the usual grind. Business is good." "Good," I replied, letting the word linger. "I heard it's been tough lately. The economy's rough. Must be hard keeping everything afloat." Jack's smile faltered, and he shifted in his seat. He let out a short laugh, clearly forced. "Well, you can't believe everything you hear, Adam. Things are fine." He took a long sip of his drink, avoiding my eyes. Lisa, perched on the edge of the couch, jumped in quickly, her tone far too bright. "Jack always figures it out," she said, her voice brimming with forced cheer. I leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with Jack. "I'm sure he does," I said smoothly, my tone laced with just enough doubt to make him squirm. The tension in the room was palpable, heavy enough to cut through. Jack shifted again, his confident facade cracking just a little more. This was only the beginning, and he had no idea what was coming next. Justice wasn't about fury. It wasn't about chaos. It was about precision. And Jack and Lisa were about to find out exactly what that meant. "He's good at that, isn't he?" I turned my attention to Lisa, catching the slight tremor in her hand as she adjusted her glass on the coffee table. "He is," I said, keeping my tone light, almost conversational. "Though I suppose we all have our secrets, don't we?" For a moment, the room seemed to freeze. Lisa blinked, her smile faltering for just a second, while Jack let out a nervous chuckle. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked, his tone laced with forced amusement that barely masked his unease. "Oh, nothing," I replied, shrugging nonchalantly. "Just that every family has its complexities. Things we don't talk about." Lisa's laugh came sharp and brittle, cutting through the tension like shattered glass. "Well, if we're talking about secrets, Adam, maybe you should start. Got anything you've been hiding?" Her deflection was clumsy, almost desperate, and it confirmed what I already suspected. She was feeling the pressure. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her, and said softly, "No secrets here. At least, None I'm not ready to share. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Jack cleared his throat and tried to redirect the conversation. "So, Lily," he said, turning to her with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "How's Harvard treating you?" Even Lily seemed to pick up on the tension, her polite responses short and clipped. The mood was irreparably fractured. As the night wore on, I kept dropping subtle hints, little barbs disguised as offhand remarks. Jack shifted uncomfortably every time, while Lisa overcompensated with forced laughter and exaggerated stories. At one point, she launched into a glowing recount of a family vacation Jack had joined years ago. Her voice was too bright, her gestures overly animated, as if she thought nostalgia might smooth over the cracks. I leaned back, feigning contemplation. "That was a great trip," I said, keeping my tone measured. "Funny how certain memories stick out more than others. Isn't it, Jack?" Jack froze mid-sip, his eyes darting to mine before he forced a smile. "Yeah, great times," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I noticed the faint sheen of sweat on his brow. By the end of the evening, I could see the toll it had taken. Jack's usual bravado was gone, replaced with a strained unease. Lisa looked like she was holding her breath, bracing for me to drop the bomb she was sure was coming. But I didn't. Not yet. As they walked to their car, I watched them exchange a nervous glance. They thought they'd survived the night, that they'd dodged the storm. They were wrong. The game was only beginning, and I was in control. Jack had always been the golden boy, the family's untouchable favorite. But his empire was built on lies, and I was going to tear it down piece by piece. The first step was to ensure he never saw me coming. If Jack suspected I was the source of his unraveling, he'd go on the defensive. That didn't fit my plan. I wanted him blindsided, vulnerable, and powerless. I started with his creditors. Using the evidence I'd collected, records of unpaid loans, his habit of shifting funds to mask his debts, I crafted anonymous tips. Each email was concise and damning, tailored specifically to banks, private lenders, and debt collection agencies. I included copies of bank statements and payment schedules, carefully scrubbed of anything that could lead back to me. The tone was concerned yet professional, presenting myself as a vigilant citizen hoping to protect the integrity of the system. The cracks began to show almost immediately. Within a week, word spread through the family that one of Jack's business accounts had been frozen pending an audit. At a barbecue, I saw the fallout firsthand. Jack, phone pressed to his ear, was barking into the receiver. His face was flushed, his free hand gripping a glass, so tightly it seemed ready to shatter. "What the hell are you talking about?" he snapped, his voice rising despite his attempts to keep it down. "I've always paid on time. There's no issue with my accounts." But there was. Next, I turned my attention to his job. Jack prided himself on being the go-to guy in his industry, a leader, a man people respected. I knew that reputation was his Achilles heel. Quietly, I began circulating whispers, anonymous messages to key figures in his professional circle, subtly raising questions about his integrity and financial practices. Concerns about whether someone with such a shaky foundation could truly be trusted. The cracks in Jack's armor widened. His confident facade began to crumble under the weight of mounting pressure. And as he struggled to contain the chaos, I knew I was only getting started. Jack and Lisa thought they could outsmart me, that their lies would stay buried. But they'd underestimated me. This wasn't just revenge, it was retribution. And I was playing the long game, so I struck him where it hurt the most, his reputation. I compiled another anonymous package, this one addressed directly to his employer. Inside, I laid out damning evidence, shady financial dealings, questionable expense reports, and proof that Jack had been using company resources to cover his personal debts. I framed it carefully, presenting myself as a loyal insider concerned about the company's future and how Jack's actions might expose them to serious liability. The fallout was swift. Jack was summoned to a series of closed-door meetings that dragged on for days. When he showed up at the next family gathering, the unshakable confidence he usually carried had vanished. He looked exhausted, his suit slightly rumpled, and his tie loosened just enough to suggest he'd been tugging at it all day. Lisa hovered near him constantly, her hand resting on his shoulder like a lifeline. Her nervous eyes darted around the room every time someone casually asked Jack about work. "Oh, it's just a busy season," she said more than once, laughing in a brittle, grating tone. "You know how corporate life can be." But I knew better. Jack wasn't just busy, he was drowning. At first, he tried to shrug it off, offering vague reassurances to anyone who asked. "It's just a little misunderstanding," he'd say, forcing a smile. "Everything's under control." But as days turned into weeks, his excuses began to crumble. The strain showed in the way he carried himself, in the sharp edge of his once charming banter. His jokes grew fewer, his temper shorter. He was unraveling, and he had no idea who was pulling the strings. Each crack in his facade brought me a grim sense of satisfaction. I wasn't just breaking down Jack's life. I was dismantling the entire illusion he had carefully built over the years. And the best part? Jack didn't have a clue where the blows were coming from. To him, it must have felt like the universe had turned against him, a streak of inexplicable bad luck. But I knew better. This wasn't luck. This was justice. The coffee shop was neutral ground, quiet enough for a private conversation, but public enough to keep things civil. Jack walked in 10 minutes late, his usual swagger dulled but not entirely gone. He scanned the room, his sharp gaze landing on me at a corner table. For a brief moment, I saw hesitation in his step, but he quickly masked it with a forced smile. "Adam," he said as he slid into the chair across from me. "What's this all about? You sounded serious." I let the question hang in the air, studying him. His shoulders were tense, his jaw faintly twitching. He wasn't as composed as he wanted me to believe. Slowly, I pulled a folder from my bag and set it on the table, my movements deliberate. Jack's eyes flicked to it, and his smile faltered. "Family matters," I said calmly, my voice measured. "I thought it was time we cleared the air." Jack laughed nervously, leaning back in his chair. "Family matters? You make it sound like a corporate board meeting. Let's call it an overdue conversation," I replied. I opened the folder, pulled out the DNA test results, and placed them face up on the table. Tapping the paper lightly, I said, "I think you'll find these illuminating." Jack's smile froze. His eyes dropped to the document, scanning it quickly. As the words sank in, the color drained from his face. He sat rigid, but instead of panic, he let out a hollow, strained laugh. "Seriously?" he said, leaning forward. "You're basing all this on a piece of paper? DNA tests aren't always accurate, Adam. Everyone knows that. It's probably a lab error." I didn't respond immediately. I simply held his gaze, letting the weight of the silence press down on him. "Don't insult my intelligence, Jack," I said finally, my voice low but steady. "We both know the truth. You're Lily's father." Jack's expression hardened, the charm and composure cracking beneath the surface. "You're out of your mind," he snapped, his voice sharp. "This is insane, Adam. What are you trying to do here? Tear the family apart? Tear the family apart?" I echoed, my voice rising slightly. "That's rich, coming from you." I leaned forward, my voice trembling with controlled anger. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You didn't just betray me. You destroyed everything I've built. My marriage, my trust, my life. All of it. And for what? For lies?" Jack leaned back, his expression a mixture of defiance and fear. He didn't have a response. I wasn't done. I gave up everything for my family. For Lily. And you took that, Jack. You stole it. You didn't just take advantage of me. You ruined the very foundation of everything I thought I could believe in. The weight of my words hung between us, the silence deafening. Jack didn't even try to argue. For once, the golden boy, the untouchable favorite, was left without a defense. The game wasn't over yet, but Jack was starting to understand one thing. I wasn't playing for redemption. I was playing to win. Jack leaned forward, his voice low and sharp. "Listen to yourself. You're obsessed. You're taking one test and spinning it into some grand conspiracy. Cut the crap, Jack," I snapped, slamming my hand onto the table. "I've seen the way you look at her. I've heard the way you talk about her. And now I have the proof." His face contorted, caught between anger and desperation. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he hissed. "You think you can ruin my life with this? Do you have any idea what this will do to Lily? To the family?" I leaned back, my voice cold and deliberate. You ruined her life the moment you decided to play God. Don't you dare pretend this is about protecting Lily or the family. This is about you. Your lies, your cowardice. Jack's hands curled into fists, knuckles white as he glared at me. His polished exterior was cracking, revealing the raw, ugly truth beneath. You're pathetic, Adam, he spat. You've always been jealous of me. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You can't stand that people like me better. That I've always been more successful, more what? I cut him off, my voice like steel. More deceitful? More selfish? More willing to stab your own brother in the back? Jack opened his mouth to retort, but the words wouldn't come. For the first time, he looked cornered, his carefully constructed facade in ruins. You've spent your whole life taking, I said, my voice steady but razor sharp. But this time, you're not getting away with it. I'm done letting you walk all over me. You're going to pay for what you've done, Jack. I'll make damn sure of it. Jack's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched tightly. You're making a mistake, he growled, his tone low and dangerous. If you go through with this, there's no coming back. You'll destroy everything. I leaned in, locking my gaze on his. Everything's already destroyed, Jack. Now I'm just making sure you feel it too. For a moment, he sat frozen, his breathing heavy, his hands gripping the table as if trying to hold himself back. Then, without a word, he shoved his chair back, stormed out of the coffee shop, and left the DNA results sitting on the table. I stayed there, letting the tension drain from my body. Jack thought he could intimidate me, that he could talk his way out of this. He was wrong. The first battle was over, but the war had only just begun. The legal papers in my hands felt heavier than they should have, as if the weight of my decision was embedded in every page. Filing the lawsuits wasn't just about seeking justice anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. Jack and Lisa couldn't simply walk away, pretending their betrayal had never happened. If they thought their lies could stay buried, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. I filed 2 lawsuits. The first was against Jack for paternity fraud and financial damages. The second targeted Lisa for marital deception and misrepresentation of our shared finances. My lawyer, a sharp and relentless advocate, assured me we had a strong case. The DNA results, bank statements, and the trail of lies spanning years weren't just compelling. They were damning. The fallout came faster than I expected. The court summonses were barely delivered before whispers of the scandal spread through the family. It didn't take long for the news to leak beyond our circle. Jack, once the golden boy with a spotless reputation, became the subject of relentless gossip and suspicion. At family gatherings, the tension was palpable. Jack's usual charm had evaporated, replaced by a strained defensiveness. Lisa avoided direct eye contact, clinging to shallow pleasantries while the air buzzed with unspoken accusations. The courtroom itself became a battleground. Jack and Lisa arrived with their lawyers, their expressions a volatile mix of anger and desperation. Jack tried to play the victim, painting me as a bitter, vindictive brother determined to destroy his life over a misunderstanding. Lisa leaned heavily into theatrics, tears falling on cue as she framed herself as a helpless woman caught in the crossfire. But their performances couldn't stand against the evidence. The DNA results, presented first, silenced the room. Cold, clinical, undeniable. My lawyer walked the court through Jack's financial manipulations, tracing a web of deceit that included misusing family resources and leaving me to bear the consequences. Lisa's betrayal was no less devastating. The timeline laid bare the pattern of deceit. Years of calculated lies designed to protect her double life while exploiting our marriage for financial security. Both of them had betrayed me, but now their betrayals were exposed for everyone to see. Jack sat rigid, his face pale as the weight of his actions settled around him. Lisa's sobs grew quieter, her confidence eroded under the scrutiny of the court. Their lies had once held up like an impenetrable wall, but now that wall was crumbling brick by brick. Justice wasn't just being served, it was being seen. And as I watched the facade of their lives fall apart, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: clarity. Jack and Lisa had taken everything from me, but now they were facing the consequences. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about truth. And in the end, the truth was something they couldn't escape. My lawyer exposed how Lisa had siphoned money from our joint accounts, disguising the transfers as household expenses to cover Jack's mounting debts. She hadn't just betrayed my trust. She lied about everything. Our finances, her loyalty, even her love. Jack's legal team scrambled to discredit the claims, trying to argue the DNA test results were unreliable. But the court-appointed expert dismantled their argument with ease. Lisa tried to shift the blame, accusing me of being controlling and paranoid, but her facade crumbled under cross-examination. When pressed on the financial discrepancies, her evasive answers only further unraveled her composure. The turning point came when my lawyer introduced testimonies from others Jack had wronged. Former business partners, distant relatives, even old acquaintances stepped forward, each recounting tales of manipulation and deceit. Together, they painted a damning portrait of a man who had spent his life exploiting others, hiding his true nature behind a mask of charm. As the case dragged on, Jack's reputation was decimated. His employer, already wary after the anonymous tips I'd sent, terminated his contract for ethical violations. His creditors, emboldened by the public nature of the lawsuit, intensified their pursuit. The man who once stood as a respected figure in the community was now a pariah. Lisa didn't escape unscathed. Her attempts to deflect responsibility, blaming both Jack and me, only alienated her further. Friends she'd once relied on turned their backs, exhausted by her lies and theatrics. In trying to save herself, she'd only managed to isolate herself completely. When the final judgment was handed down, it was decisive. The court ruled in my favor, awarding significant damages for the emotional and financial toll their actions had caused. But the monetary settlement wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was the public acknowledgement of their betrayal. The validation that I wasn't paranoid or imagining things. Jack and Lisa had destroyed everything, and now the truth was out for all to see. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt an unexpected sense of closure. Their carefully crafted lies were in tatters, exposed for what they were. Jack and Lisa were left standing in the wreckage of their own creation. As for me, I was finally free. Sitting on the porch of my new home, I let myself breathe. The air felt different, cleaner, lighter, like the weight of the past year had finally lifted. The sun was setting, casting the sky in warm hues of orange and gold, a perfect reflection of the fresh start I'd fought so hard to create. The scars of their betrayal remained, but they no longer defined me. I'd spent so much time consumed by anger, humiliation, and heartbreak, but now I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. The battles were over, the lies exposed, and the truth was undeniable. Jack and Lisa's betrayals had been the most painful experiences of my life, but they taught me something invaluable: resilience. Strength I hadn't known I possessed until I had no choice but to fight. Lily was still in my life, and that was what mattered most. After the revelations, we had a long, difficult conversation. She struggled to reconcile the father who raised her with the man whose DNA tied them together. But in the end, she chose me. Biology doesn't make a dad, she said, her voice steady, her eyes unwavering. You do. Her words mended a part of me I hadn't realized was broken. Whatever Jack and Lisa had taken, they couldn't touch the bond Lily and I shared. That was mine, untouchable, unshakable. I wasn't naive enough to think everything would be perfect from here. Doubts and echoes of the past would linger, surfacing at unexpected moments. But I'd made a choice to move forward, to rebuild, to reclaim my happiness. I found a new job, smaller and less demanding, but fulfilling in ways I hadn't anticipated. Therapy, something I'd resisted for far too long, helped me untangle the chaos I'd endured. Slowly but surely, I began crafting a life that was entirely mine, not dependent on anyone else's lies or manipulation. As for Jack and Lisa, they were ghosts now, remnants of a chapter I'd closed for good. Jack disappeared from public view, his reputation in ruins. Lisa, clinging to whatever sympathy she could muster, flailed in her attempts to regain relevance. Neither of them mattered to me anymore. Their choices had destroyed them, not me. Taking a sip of my coffee, I felt the warmth spread through me, a quiet reminder of all the small joys I'd rediscovered. The life I was building wasn't grand or flashy, but it was real, honest, and that made it worth everything I'd endured to get here. Betrayal is a knife in the back, I thought, the words resonating more deeply now than they ever had before. But it won't define me. It won't destroy me. I stood, stretching as the cool evening breeze whispered around me, carrying with it the promise of a new beginning. Out there was a world waiting for me, one I was finally ready to embrace. The man I was before all of this, he no longer existed. And that wasn't a loss. It was a transformation. I'd become stronger, wiser, more resolute about who I was and what I stood for. Jack and Lisa had underestimated me, and they paid the price for their deceit. The person they betrayed wasn't the person who stood here now. I'd grown, I'd endured, and I'd prevailed. And now, I was ready to rebuild, to start over, to reclaim my life on my own terms. And that's the story of how betrayal tried to break me, but instead made me stronger. At the end of the day, it's not the lies or the pain that define us. It's how we rise from the ashes. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you face something similar, remember, you are not alone, and you have the power to reclaim your life. This is Reddit Cheating Stories, where we uncover the truth, one story at a time. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more tales of resilience, revenge, and redemption. See you in the next video.